Most financial advisors are not bad people. I want to start there. But the way that the industry works is it can create quiet incentives for the advisor that benefits the advisor more so than the client. So today I want to talk to you about the most common unethical things that some financial advisors can do, and not to paint, every advisor with a broad stroke, but just to give you some advice so that way when you're going about this through your own process, you can see some of these things and avoid them. Here's a reality check before we get into the nitty-gritty. Research shows that 7% of financial advisors have been disciplined for misconduct or fraud at some point in their career. And out of those financial advisors, 38% of them are repeat offenders. That doesn't mean that 7% of all advisors are terrible, right? It just means that a non-negligible share have run into some serious issues, and a lot of them have run into those issues multiple times. One of the biggest ethical issues isn't undisclosed conflicts, it's poorly explained conflicts. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Advisors might technically disclose how they get paid, but that might be covered in, down in paperwork that you'll never see or read, or it's 63 pages. It's like, I'm not going to read all that, and that's where the fee or cost might be buried. Or they might just talk about it in some jargon that most people aren't going to understand anyways. That leaves you feeling, oh, this guy's smart, he's gonna understand my situation and point me in the right direction. And then you get to the point where it's like, oh wait, shoot, this product that I'm in right now, I can tell this benefited him more so than me. And now that's where the trust breaks down. Just because it's disclosed doesn't mean that it's fully understood. And that's a big thing for me. I always tell all of my clients that I want to be able to educate them on all their options. I want them to fully understand the reasons why I'm recommending something to them and why it benefits them. If they can go and tell a neighbor or a friend, why the situation works for them, or, what the product is or how I'm helping them, fully explain it and understand it, then that's a win for me, because then we come to reviews and they know exactly what we're going to be talking about, what we're going to be discussing. Here's the plan. All right, let's go point by point by point. And, that creates trust. Education always creates trust in this field of business. Another problem is when the conversation will jump straight to product before the plan. Instead of discussing, what the client's goals are, what their timeline is, what the retirement plan looks like, they go straight to a proprietary product or a annuity or an insurance product instead of looking at the plan itself. These tools can absolutely have a place in anybody's strategy. The issue isn't the products. It's starting with the product before knowing what's best for the client, before getting to know what the plan is. If the product drives the plan instead of serving the plan, then that's when good intentions can turn into bad outcomes. You're in a meeting and something smells like a sales pitch dressed up as a strategy. It probably is one. Trust your scent. Fees are one of the biggest frustrations that I see. Most advisory firms will charge based on a percentage of assets under management, which a lot of people like. They like fee-based advisors. That's not the issue. The issue is all the other underlying fees that they might not be telling you about that might be hidden, within the 60 pages of paperwork. So you could have your initial investment advisory fee, but then under that might be, administration fees or selling fees, whatever it might be that eventually will start to stack up on top of the already 1% advisory fee that you're being charged. Individually, each expense might sound pretty reasonable, but very few clients are going to ever look at the total cost in dollars of 5, 10, 20 years. That gap between what people think they're paying versus what they're actually paying is where the resentment starts. Percentages are easy to forget. Dollars are hard to ignore. Some advisors will lean on complexity a lot, which can be an issue. Busy statements, frequent trades, or just tactical terms that most people aren't going to understand. Complexity can make advice sound or feel very sophisticated. It's not always the same as value. And when something goes wrong or results disappoint, complexity can often make it harder for the client to ask questions or really understand what it is that went wrong within their own portfolio. Not every advisor lies about performance, but what they'll do is they'll showcase the highlights of the story. So much like a baseball player, if they want to put on their highlights on a reel, they're going to show everything that they did great, but leave out the errors. kind of like a financial advisor will to win business. So they'll show, some of the great trades that they made or, outperformance of the market without really necessarily any context. That's not just salesmanship, that's expectation setting, which is the worst thing that a financial advisor can do. Because when the markets turn, people feel blindsided, not because the market went down, but because they were surprised by how their portfolio performed during those years. People don't regret volatility, they regret being surprised by it. And I want to touch on that because it's very important. If you're going to be aggressively invested in the market or have stocks or own something that's, in the market, you need to be prepared for down years because ultimately, the market's not always going to be a straight line growing up. I know for the last 30 years, the S&P has done 10% on average, but it's not going to do that every single year. You need to expect that if you're going to invest money, every year isn't going to be a good year. So hopefully your agent is communicating with that and that you have steps in place to help either counteract that or, if it's a long-term investment, then you're not necessarily worried about it. This one is subtle but powerful. Some of the most problems that we have are not because an advisor pushes too hard, but because they think that, or they assume that you won't ask the tough questions or don't want to make changes once things are set up. So because of that, reviews don't happen, questions go unasked, and time goes by without any changes being made to your portfolio. That's not aggressive misconduct, that's passive neglect. And it's the same to clients because it's just as bad. They're not developing trust with their clients like they should be because they're not establishing that either annual review or that constant communication. Here's the thing. People want to trust an advisor. In surveys, trust is the most important quality to look for in an advisor, more so than performance and experience. 72% of people will look for trust over performance, and 61% of people, if that trust breaks, then they're going to be okay with firing their advisor. That should tell you something. People don't separate trust from value, and when trust breaks, everything falls apart. None of this means that you should distrust every advisor. It means that you should expect clarity. Good advice can be explained in plain language, holds up to questions, and doesn't depend on confusion. If a recommendation falls apart under scrutiny, then odds are it wasn't that great to begin with. If you're working with an advisor or even thinking about working with an advisor, there are a few questions that are important to ask. Questions like, how do you get paid on every scenario? What are the trade-offs for these options that you're giving me? What do we do in a down market? What happens if we want to change course later? A good advisor will welcome this conversation and actually have answers to all those questions. You didn't build your wealth by being naive, and you didn't protect it by being unclear. The purpose of this isn't to make you even more suspicious. It's to make you more informed. If you're going into a meeting with an advisor, I don't want you to have your walls up. I just want you to be informed enough to ask the questions that are going to benefit you. If you want a second set of eyes on your situation or just want, a little clarification on what you have, there's going to be a link below. You can set up a time to have a conversation with me. No sales pitch, no pressure. Thank you for coming to today's episode. I'm Tommy 2 Cents. Take it easy.